Hi, my name is Karina Castillo, and I researched co-regulation strategies for kids with autism. My primary reader are parents of children with autism. For my research plan, I focused on gaining factual evidence-based strategies that can be used to support emotional and behavioral development. I used the UNF One Search Library using the keywords autism, co regulation, parent emotional regulation, things of that nature. I also prioritized finding articles that would give me actionable and practical strategies that parents would be able to use in their home, things that are actually feasible to do. I also had to really understand and research what co-regulation is and how your brain works when you have autism and how autism affects emotional regulation and how coping strategies can differ for somebody with autism. For example, stimming is a form of coping and emotional and physical regulation that typically people without autism do not do. So that is one difference. So I really just had done some few quick regular Google searches. I actually watched some TikTok videos as well for me to understand a little more about this topic to correctly do my research and complete this project. For my first source, I found it was an article that investigated how parent co regulation strategies and scaffolding relate to emotional problems, internalizing versus externalizing, and found that children with autism, ASD stands for autism spectrum disorder, rely significantly more on maladaptive or involuntary emotional regulation strategies compared to typically developing peers. So things like this would be avoidance, like they just do not want to be around any sort of problems, issues, overstimulation, things of that nature, tantrums, sobbing, which basically would just be crying for long periods of times, much longer than a typically developing child, and mentally stuck in a loop, which would just be like, for example, if somebody got in trouble for something very minor, they would just not be able to get over it. It would just be playing in a loop in their head over and over and over again. The parent scaffolding and child emotional regulation deficits directly predicted externalizing problems such as aggression and hyperactivity, though they were not significantly associated with internalizing problems like anxiety. This source contributed to my research plan because emotional regulation is heavily shaped by the parents. Acting out and behaviors are clear signs of emotional struggles, and research and data on the child's needs needed multiple perspectives and were can't just be based off of the parent. Additionally, it also like all of this basically just tells us that co-regulation is dependent on parent and that parent and child relationship. Source 2 proposes a comprehensive developmental framework mapping out how autism specific challenges disrupt the parent child co regulation system in early childhood. Co regulation operates on both micro, moment by moment, and macro, a long term scale to help children build lifelong coping mechanisms. Autism specific factors such as idiosyncratic emotional triggers, low emotional awareness, and ambiguous emotional communication frustrate standard parenting responses. This often makes parents into a quick fix strategy that hinder long term emotional regulation development. So, for example, if your child is just being really aggressive, you would maybe give them an iPad or give them a toy to play with to distract them to prevent the aggression. However, this is a quick fix and doesn't actually work with the main reason for the aggressive behavior. It really does nothing long term. This contributed to my research plan with showing us how emotional dysregulation as a parent child interaction rather than an individual child problem, and how quick fixes spiral into severe externalizing problems. So behaviors just get worse and worse and worse. For my synthesis, both articles helped me to identify parent child co regulation as a key factor to shaping behavioral outcomes and emotion regulation in kids with autism, but they both approach this differently from different developmental stages of kids and from different methodological lenses, showing how research can change and how different researchers can view things differently. This little chart down here is just a comparison chart. It shows the core focus, risks, and critiques. So, one article focused on parent scaffolding directly predicts, while the other focused on autism specific traits moment to moment. One risk was autism relies on involuntary or maladaptive strategies, while the other says that the breakdown in co regulation forces family into quick fixes. And a critique of one article says that heavy reliance on parents' reports can affect data, while the other calls for real time ecological data collection. Both articles state that interventions must move beyond individual behavior management and support the parent child as a whole system. In conclusion, both articles had great individual contributions, basically saying empirical evidence linking parental scaffolding to externalizing behaviors, framework explaining how autism specific communication barriers disrupt the dynamic, but together they help to bridge the gap between early childhood theory and school age outcomes and establish an evidence based definition of parent child co regulation. My takeaway from this is that co regulation is a dynamic, real time interactive system and not a static individual skill. Here are my references for both of my articles. These two articles were the only things I referenced throughout this entire presentation. Thank you.